Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is keeping well, keeping warm wherever you are. Your time today is greatly appreciated. Okay, we're going to get started in a second. But just as a bit of an introduction to myself, my name is Tristan Govender. I am the Senior Security Engineer at CRS. I handle all of these solutions from a technical capacity, but I am the solution lead for Flare, Strobes, and Aikido. It's my honor today to be presenting on Flare IO today to bring it to market. It's a long-established partnership. It's something that we have been working on for quite a while, and we're really looking forward to showcasing exactly the power of Flare and exactly what it's been doing in the African markets. Okay, just for some background on who CRS is, there are two different divisions to CRS. In one division, we're an ICT training center, and CRS is an authorized IBM training delivery partner. We're an authorized training partner for RedHat and SUSE. We offer agile training through SAFE, and we are a CompTIA training partner as well. We're also a cybersecurity value added distributor, or VAD in short. And essentially, this means that we are a fully channel focused partner. We transact only with our partners, not with end users. And the only time that we engage with end users is when we do so through partners. And that's on implementation, support, and skills handover sessions. So just to give you some background on today's sessions, we will be taking a look at a proactive cyber defense in the African landscape. We'll be breaking down some of the problems that we see within South Africa, within the African landscape as well, branching out into like Kenya and Ghana and all of those key areas and key markets through the African continent. And we'll showcase exactly where Flare is able to come in to be able to assist with those types of issues, right? So one of the first things that we are going to get into is statistics, right? Statistics obviously is the key corner and fundamentals in understanding where we are and where we are going, right? So I've put together a couple that we are able to take a look at. First of all, cybercrime accounts for more than 30% of all reported crime in Western and Eastern Africa, right? It's a staggering figure. It showcases that cybercrime isn't a niche problem. It's not something that is just something that other countries and other continents are dealing with, but this is a a a necessary issue that we need to be very aware of, right? It underscores the pervasiveness of the nature of digital threats and how it's growing on the African continent. And we see this in the continuous uprise of ransomware, right? Ransomware is one of the most critical and detrimental effects to organizations. And we've seen that ransomware detections in Africa rose in 2024, with South Africa and Egypt suffering the highest number, right? That was at 17,849 and 12,281 detections, respectively, right? This follows other highly digitized economies like Nigeria, which has 3,459, and Kenya with 3,030. This shows a clear upward trend in ransomware attacks, impacting the most digitized economies and with the hardest types of attacks, right? These numbers are concrete examples of the widespread and damaging nature of these types of attacks. And then finally, we have the BEC or business email compromise related incidents that also rose significantly, with 11 African nations accounting for the majority of your business email compromise activity originating on the continent. In West Africa, business email compromise fraud has been driven highly by well-organized multi-million-dollar criminal enterprises like transnational syndicates like Black Axe, right? This is a lucrative form of cybercrime. It has a significant rise and particularly driven by organized criminal groups like Black Axe. It highlights the specific sophistication and the financial impact of those threats. Okay. And where does this come from? Credential leaks, right? So this is where we see that researchers have confirmed that we have an exposure of 16 billion login credentials, including passwords from widely used platforms like Apple, Google, Facebook, GitHub, and various different government portals that have been breached. This is an unprecedented scale of compromised data. The sheer volume, which is more than doubled in the world's population, indicates widespread credential stuffing potential, which individual account compromises across multiple different services. This has an inclusion of high-value targets like government portals and major tech platforms that make the leaks exceptionally dangerous. It's not just about what is exposed, it is about the same password usage by our employees across the board. This inherently leads to a massive risk across the board for our organizations. Okay. We've also got the blueprint for mass exploitation, right? So we see that the described by analysts, the blueprint for mass exploitation is those credential leaks, right? Crucial infostealer malware is designed to covertly extract sensitive information, including credentials from infected devices. And the fact that there's a blueprint that's available is, or essentially that they use this as a blueprint for mass exploitation, showcases that it's a very easy win for these types of organizations, right? If they have this level of exploitation of those credential leaks, we have a massive issue within our regions. Okay, it's not just a leak, it's a weaponized data set that is going to be used against every part of our organization. Then we are the vast majority of compromised data is previously unreported and thus fresh, which means that it's immediately exploitable, right? This means that it's a very critical point. It's fresh data, which means that it's highly likely that the credentials are still valid, making them immediately exploitable for account takeovers, further data breaches, and other malicious activities. If we don't take that cybersecurity aspect seriously, if we are not taking credential leaks seriously, we are inherently putting ourselves at risk of accounts credential takeover, of business email compromise, of further breaches to our organizations. Okay. When we are taking a look at the South African perspective, we have Section 19 of POPIA that requires responsible parties to implement appropriate and reasonable technical and organizational measures to prevent loss, damage, and unauthorized access to personal information. So with these credential leaks, it's highly important that we are taking all the necessary measures in place to be able to remove ourselves from further breach, right? It also directly links the leak credentials to legal obligations. Organizations are legally mandated to protect personal information, and breaches of this magnitude clearly violates that principle, right? So yes, there is a POPI incident because of the breach itself. However, organizations will be held further in disrepute if they do not take the necessary measures to clear up those types of credential breaches internally as well. Okay. Organizations like the FSCA, National Department of Health, the CASA have all previously emphasized cybersecurity resilience as components of regulatory compliance. This reinforces the regulatory pressure across various different critical sectors in South Africa, and cybersecurity is not an optional part of this, right? It is a fundamental requirement for operating legally and responsibly, especially in industries handling sensitive information. This mass credential exposure presents an immediate and severe threat, which means that we have increased risks of account takeovers from cybercriminals that use these fresh credentials to gain unauthorized access to corporate accounts, customer accounts, and internal systems. We also got a gateway to further attacks in this, right? So compromised credentials lead to initial access points for more sophisticated attacks like ransomware deployments, data exfiltration, and business email compromise. And we've got reputational damage and financial loss that comes as part of this. So breaches are due to leak credentials that lead to severe reputational harm, loss of customer trust, and substantial financial penalties from regulatory bodies under POPIA. And then finally, we've got supply chain vulnerabilities that form part of this as well. If credentials of third-party vendors or supply chain partners are exposed, it creates a significant entry point into the organization's ecosystem, right? So this is exactly what brings us into Flare, right? Where is Flare able to assist with something like this? Flare unifies monitoring of thousands of cybercrime communities and clear web sites to proactively detect the threats that lead to ransomware attack, data breaches, and security incidents. This is a critical. Instead of reacting after an attack, Flare helps organizations get ahead of the monitoring for the places where threats are discussed, planned, and sold. This is a proactive approach to key industries or to key cybersecurity metrics. and it reduces the impact of cybercrime trends that we just would have reviewed, right? So we are essentially staying ahead of the curve of further potential breaches by making use of Flare, right? They were founded in 2017, headquartered in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. They have over 200 customers in over 30 different countries globally. We've seen it work exponentially well into the South African regions as well. And it's a continuously growing solution, right? It's a key market entry for all of those who are MSSPs, value-added resellers on the call. And for customers, this is a pertinent solution that you would need to be able to proactively defend your organization. Okay. I'm now going to introduce you to Stuart Smith, right? Stuart Smith is a cyber solutions engineer at Flare. He's a seasoned cybersecurity professional. Stuart works with the media organizations to improve their cyber threat intelligence, and he specializes in using Flare's clear and dark web monitoring to be able to detect and mitigate threats like risks like ransomware, data breaches, and credential leaks. I'm going to hand it over to Stuart now to be able to take us through a demo of Flare, right? If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of the session as well. Thanks, Stuart.
Cheers. Thank you, Tristan. A great overview, and thanks for the introduction. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so my name's Stu Smith, solutions engineer, sales engineer for Flare covering EMEA. I just want to give you a quick overview of the Flare platform, just to give you an idea of the capabilities, what we do, what we can help you guys with. And, you know, if people like what they see, then I'd be happy to do, you know, a follow-up deeper dive session with CRS, you know, just to keep your interest in Flare. Like Tristan said, there's a lot of information out there, you know, and that's the key thing in the dark web. As you all know, you know, there's just billions of bits of information. At Flare, we're very open and transparent about where we gather that information from, where we collect it. And I think that's a good starting point, because you can see where we are gathering information from. From this list here, you can see that auto shops and illicit forums and dark web blogs and marketplaces and open web, these are all areas that we gather information from. And you can see that we are adding sources on a monthly basis. And we see users of the Flare platform. It's a two-way street. We are very open to feedback, and we're very open for users and partners and resellers to say, right, okay, well, we want you to add this dark web forum, or we want you to add this Telegram channel to the 25,000 Telegram channels that you're gathering information from, or the Signal channels that we've recently added into the platform. I think it's very refreshing for our partners and our users to know that we are so open and transparent about essentially what the platform does and where it gathers the info from. As you can imagine, in the Flare database, there is petabytes worth of information. To gather that information and to search through that information, what you need to add is what we call identifiers. And in their simplest terms, they are basically search criteria. So an identifier could be a domain, it could be a bin number, it could be an IP address range or CIDR block, it could be a VIP. It's whatever what you're essentially saying to the platform is go and search through your database to find references to this top level domain or this person or this email address or this IP address. The platform will take that and search through, like I said, the huge amounts of data that we have, whether it's dark web, clear web, deep web, whatever it is. The platform goes up and says, right, I am now going to search for those identifiers. When it finds information, it comes back and says, this is what I have discovered, automatically categorizing it into info, low, medium, high, and critical, and then automatically categorizing everything. So it's a really simple platform to use. So in the dark and deep web, we've automatically broke it down into marketplaces, infected devices, which is like Tristan said, which is essentially stealer logs, leaked ransomware files, discussions, blog posts, financial data, open web, host information. So any internet facing devices we can gather information from, open ports, vulnerabilities, CVEs, leaky buckets, Google Docs, GitHub mentions, paste sites, all of those. Leak credentials, again, it's a huge problem with leak credentials. Lookalike domains, which is essentially phishing domains or impersonations, or somebody just hosting a domain and then wanting to sell it, or all those types of things. The platform is doing this automatically. So as a user of the platform, it's like I said, and I sort of like to really reiterate this. I've worked with various dark web platforms before, from open source to some of your really obscenely expensive platforms. I think Flare is probably the easiest I've used, because it just does what it says on the tin, as we say in the UK. It says, what do you want me to look for in the Flare database? You add those identifiers and it says, this is what I have discovered. It's as simple as that. So we can look at host details, like I said, we can look at GitHub mentions, we can look at code shares, we can look at all of that type of information. But what you can do is you can then say, well, actually, start filtering it down and say, what I'm interested in is infected devices and ransom leaks. So I've started to filter that down to say we're now looking at 488 events. What I've previously done is I've cherry picked some pretty interesting stealer logs and ransom leak files that we've discovered. So we look at this stealer log here. So exactly like Tristan said, what a stealer log is when a user downloads a malicious file, clicks on a malicious link, goes to a malicious website, or opens a malicious document that is infected with malware, that endpoint then gets infected with that particular malware. That malware or infostealer will sit on that endpoint and it will gather a huge amount of information from that endpoint. Usernames, passwords, browser history, autofill files, cookie details, where those users have been going, all of the profiles on that endpoint, and all of the profiles for every single browser that is used on that particular machine. That malware packages that up into a zip file, sends it off to a command and control server, and then a threat actor now has access to those stealer log files. Because Flare is also gathering information from those shared environments, from those forums that threat actors share all of their information, we can gather all of the content of that stealer log. So what we see here is the type of stealer log or malware. So we can see it's Luma C2. Luma is a malware that's been around for years. We can see the estimated infection date. So this was the 9th of June this year. We can see the file that was actually downloaded that was infected with that malware. So we can see that somebody's downloaded a malicious msbuild.exe file. We've got OS details, we've got the username, we've got their IP address, we've got their geolocation, specs of the machine. Then we start getting into the really interesting stuff. So we can see where these files are being shared. And in some instances, these stealer logs are being shared on 15 to 20 different Telegram channels. What the malware will do in some instances will actually take a screenshot of that endpoint as soon as it becomes infected. So if I just zoom in there, what we can see is that is the file that individual downloaded. They thought they were installing this msbuild.exe file. It was actually infected with malware. This is the point when that machine became infected. And then we can start looking at all the files that info stealer gathered. So you can see there is huge amounts of information. They use this individual on this endpoint is using a Brave browser, which doesn't do any tracking. It's classed as a particular safe browser, but obviously it still doesn't stop people becoming infected. The individual profiles, all of the browser history, the password files, cookie details, and autofill, all of the users of Chrome, every single bit of detail that is on that machine that a threat actor thinks they would want to use to exploit this endpoint is stored in that particular info stealer, that malware stealer log. What we can then do is we present it in a much easier view. So what we can see here is all of the URLs this particular individual has visited, all of the associated usernames and passwords. You can see over here, there are 1,129 credentials alone just off that one endpoint and that one stealer log. And more importantly, all of the active cookie sessions within that browser, within those browsers. The reason that cookies are so interesting is a lot of them have a very long expiration date. So you can see here, some of these active cookies on this endpoint don't expire until July 2026. The reason that this is so important, this goes back to Tristan's comment earlier, is that threat actors obviously always want the path of least resistance. So having credentials, usernames and passwords, it is good, but having active cookies is far more important and far more critical, because with an active cookie, that threat actor can essentially issue what we call an ATO, which is an account takeover, by using those active cookies. So when I go to Amazon, for example, amazon.co.uk, I don't have to keep re-authenticating. I don't have to keep logging in every single time I visit that page. And that's because I have an active cookie in my browser. If a threat actor gets hold of those active Amazon cookies off my endpoint, for all intents and purposes, they bypass multi-factor authentication. They don't need to log in. They would impersonate me. They would have my IP address, have my machine name. They would have everything to essentially be me and then go into my Amazon account. Exactly the same as they would want to go into any sort of online retailer, any sort of airport or flight company. Obviously, you imagine some people will have huge amounts of frequent flight points that will be worth a lot of money. So cookies are incredibly important. But also on top of that, I mean, we are all guilty of logging into Chrome, logging into a website, Chrome saying, do you want me to save this username and password? And we all put yes. And that is where it sits in these autofill files and all of these files that are stored. What we can also see is this individual. If I go to here, for example, because they've used the autofill, they've also saved their credit card details. And I can view all of these stealer log files. So I can view that and see credit card number, expiry date. Sometimes it will also have the CVV details. I now basically have all the details I need for that individual's credit card. So not only do I have access to their accounts, I have access to their credit cards. I can also look at their browser history. So if they've been going to less salubrious websites, that could also be used for potential blackmail of that individual. So stealer logs are incredibly important. They are a critical piece of information that threat actors will actively use. And again, like I said, these will be shared on umpteen Telegram channels. The same goes for ransom leaks. Again, ransom attacks are, they're a huge thing globally. It's not just specific to South Africa or the UK or the US. It is a global issue. So when we gather stealer logs, those are shared on multiple Telegram channels and forums and blogs. We gather that information from. We do exactly the same with ransom leak files. So you can see here that these particular leaked ransom files were shared on a forum called Ransom Hub. What has happened here is, this is from 2024. This particular company, Beam Me Up Steelworks, they were part of a ransom leak, and we get all of the content of all of that entire ransom leak. We give you the URL. So that URL is actually what we call an onion site. So anything that is .onion is basically dark web. So you would need a Tor browser to open that link if you wanted to. So not only do we give you all the details around who it was that was under a ransom attack, when it was, but more importantly, we give you all of those leaked files. So we can see here that there were 18 leaked files, for example. What we can do with the platform, we can add an identifier. So if you're talking to a customer or you are a customer, so using Flare, you wouldn't put in your own company details, because if you're under a ransom attack, you're going to know about it, obviously. What you'd want to do is add your supply chain. So the critical companies that are in your supply chain, you would want to add them as an identifier into the platform. What will happen is the platform will take that company name, that brand name, or whatever it is, and it will say, again, search through all of the data that we have from ransom leaks and says, does this particular identifier appear in any of the leaked ransom files that we have? So we can see here in my demo platform, this is the keywords. This is what the platform is looking for, which is scatterholt, and it's appeared in this particular ransom breach. And I can zoom into that and I can say, well, what are the leaked files? So we can see out of those 18 leaked files that were part of that ransom attack, 4 of those have reference to scatterholt, and we get the file location. And if we wanted to, we can actually request those files, because if that dark web server is still up and running, then we can request, via our team of analysts, we can request that file, and you can say, right, okay, I'm not really concerned about that, it's an old report. Or you could say, that's a really critical report. We need to move that to a different location, or whatever it is that we need to do. And again, credentials, because we're not just looking at stealer logs, we're looking at combo lists, we're looking at URL breaches. Every single credential that we have within the database, you can search. So you have visibility of all of these credentials. So you can see where they come from, and you can filter that to say, I need to know about stealer log credentials, but more importantly, I need to know about ones that adhere to our password policy. So you can start filtering that down. What you can also do in the platform, which we've recently released, is we can integrate with Entra ID. So what we can do is look at these credentials. With the integration to Entra ID, we can say, are these active accounts? Because that's the problem with combo lists. Combo lists tend to be regurgitated information, probably from several years ago. You want to, rather than wasting lots of man hours finding out if it's an active account, downloading these into a CSV, downloading the equivalent from Entra ID, maybe creating a PowerShell script to do a comparison, use the Entra ID integration within Flare. We will say whether they are active matching accounts, and then the next step is to issue a password reset automatically against those accounts that have been compromised. So if we discover some stolen credentials or leaked credentials at 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't have to wait until 9 a.m. for your analyst to come in, see that alert and do something about it. We can automate that entire process, and that's the thing with Flare. We are giving you information as soon as we see it. You can create alerts and reports, and then with the integration of Entra ID, we're just automating that process. So you will get a notification to say, this credential has been discovered. It's an active Entra ID account. We've issued a password reset to that end user. That is a completely automated process. What we also have is what we call threat flow. So again, going back to what Dreisten was talking about, cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, stealer logs, they are a global issue. They generate billions, if not trillions worth of money across the dark web every year. What we can use within the Flare platform is what we call threat flow. So threat flow is an AI engine that is part of the Flare platform, and it will automatically generate its own what we call Flare intelligence. So you can see here, threat actor Pablo Escobar claims to have server-side, prototype, population, exploit targeting, bitmart, for example. But what you can also do is you can create what we call custom intel by asking a question, like you would with ChatGPT or something like that. So what I have done here is I have said, give me details of cyber attacks in South Africa over the last 3 months. So this is the content of that report. So it shows you the threat actors that are responsible, what they tend to be targeting: finance, critical infrastructure and transport. They use malware, phishing kits and compromised credentials. Active motivation is obviously cybercrime, financial gain, data theft. And then you get an executive summary, key insights, increasing 36% of online banking fraud, and obviously ATM bombing is a huge thing in South Africa. We link that to the MITREATT&CK framework. So this is a good way of focusing to say, right, okay, we need to do, especially with the help from the CRS guys, you say, right, we need some more phishing campaign training for our end users. We've got stealer logs appearing. We need some more, cybersecurity training. You can also look through all of the conversations that the platform analyzed, all of the dark web mentions, Telegram chat, Signal conversations, forums, blogs, to say, well, how did I create this particular report? So we've got a database leak there a couple of months ago in South Africa. We've got another one here, which was in June 2026. This one was back in May, another one back in April. Constant leaks of credentials, personal identifiable information. And then you can also see if there are any related events. So has the platform picked up any of those types of conversations relating to South Africa and created what we call events in the platform? Obviously, you can add all of this type of information to reports. And if you're an MSSP, we can white label this, so you can use your own color scheme. You can use your own logo in the reports. So again, the report engine is clever enough to look at the events to say, well, actually, based on the events I've discovered, then we have found these CVEs, we've found this service running, we've found stealer logs, we've found combo lists, we've found leak credentials. It isn't just saying, here's your high level information. It's really focusing on the information that you want to see in that report. And that's the key thing. You can also manually keep adding events into reports and alerts. Obviously, there's a lot we can do. Alerts, everything that I've shown you, you can query via API. So everything in the events, everything in this UI, you can query via API, but you can also generate alerts to email, send them out to Slack, Microsoft Teams, ServiceNow, Splunk, Azure Sentinel. We can use webhooks. It's an incredibly flexible platform with regards to taking the information that you're interested in, but then presenting it in a way that you don't need to be a cybersecurity expert to understand what you're looking at. You can very quickly say, well, actually, I'm just interested in high and critical events. So again, combo lists, stealer logs, open ports with, over 83 CVEs associated with them. All of this type of information is presented in a way that is just very easy and simple to understand. So yeah, I'll hand you back over to Dryston. If you've got any questions or anything, obviously we can have a Q&A session, but if you think of anything after the call's finished, then obviously reach out to CRS. We can do a more in-depth demo, or we can set up POCs, because it's a multi-tenanted platform. It's MSSP ready, so it's really good for you guys that don't have to worry about customer A seeing customer B's data. It's completely multi-tenanted. So yeah, Tristan, I'll hand over back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Stuart. That was brilliant. I'd also like to introduce now Stephanie Monaghan. This is Flair's Director of Channel and Alliances for EMEA. Stephanie joined the Montreal-based cybersecurity company in March 2025, bringing extensive IT channel and cybersecurity experience from her time at Google Cloud Security and Mandiant. She's now focused on expanding Flair's partner ecosystem across EMEA, which includes value-added resellers, MSSPs, and distributors, to support the company's rapid growth. So over to you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Tristan, and thanks for the demo, Stu. So now Stu has shown you what Flare can do. I'm just going to talk very quickly around the key kind of areas where it can help you, both as an end customer of Flare, but also as a partner or an MSSP that uses Flare to enhance their service. Next slide, thank you. So as you've seen, Flare can give you real-time actionable data to help you understand your attack surface and what information is available out there to potential cyber criminals. And on top of that, it will automatically extract the details that are pertinent to your organization. Multiple customers that are using Flare have revealed that up to 1,000 hours annually are saved by this automation. And that equates to roughly a 60K labor saving. In addition, by using Flare instead of multiple, disparate threat intel tools, which a lot of companies do, you can also make cost savings on tool consolidation. We do also estimate that by using Flare, the risk of leaked credentials actually reduces by 50%, because we allow customers to detect and respond to these leaks quickly and in real time. We often can get to those leaks before they are exploited by cyber criminals. So, that is a big reduction in the risk. Next slide, please, Tristan. So as Tristan mentioned, I head up our channel here, and Flare sits extremely well in the MSSP arena. So Flare for MSSPs can help you to enhance your existing MDR offering. Or aside from that, we have some MSSPs that may not be offering an MDR service, but they build a standalone threat intel or dark web monitoring service around Flare. So it can integrate with your existing SIEM, SOAR, or TIP solution, and it will enable you to provide your clients with actionable intelligence that can enhance their security posture. And obviously, the service you can wrap around that is a great value that you can offer to them. You can create things like custom reports and send these to your customers and provide alerts when credentials appear on illicit forums. And we do have MSSPs as well that are offering remediation services off the back of that. For any companies that may be offering incident response, we can also help you to save time and manpower by highlighting leaked credentials and their sources. This often saves a lot of time, a lot of consultancy time, which frees you up to do other consultancy work. So, we really do believe that Flare can differentiate your managed service offering, and a large number of MSSPs across EMEA and in Canada and the US are using Flare to do so. So, if this is of interest, we'd be very keen to speak to you, and Tristan will show you a QR code at the end whereby you can contact us through CRS to kind of talk about next steps. Next slide, thanks, Tristan. So just a very quick summary now. So why Flare? Next slide, please. We understand that there are, multiple different offerings in the market. But we believe that our continuous monitoring of over 8,000 external data sources, it really does set us apart from our competitors. Not many are monitoring that, the amount that we are. We are also hugely transparent about where we collect our data from. So Stu mentioned this before. A lot of our competitors will not reveal, where their collections are from. We are very transparent. We're also very flexible. I think Stu also mentioned that, if we're not monitoring something you think we should, we have a form on our website where you can submit a collection request, and more often than not, we will start to monitor that. So, we're very flexible, very agile. And I think, one of our biggest differentiators is simply the time to use. We are very, very easy to use and very quick to set up. And many customers get value from Flare within the first 5 minutes. Some of our competitors are extremely complex and need extensive training around the solutions, whereas Flare is very intuitive. We do also give each customer or MSSP a dedicated customer success rep to ensure that you are using the product to the best of its abilities and getting true value from it. So we do believe this sets us apart in the market. So that's all from me. But again, like I said, we're very keen to speak to partners in the region. So if this is of interest, please speak to CRS. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. Really, really appreciate it. So essentially, we've seen the demo of Flare. We've seen exactly where on the African continent, essentially where Flare would be placed. We've taken a look at the commercial benefits. We've taken a look at the benefits for end users as well, for banks, for insurance industries, for government industries, etc. However, if you want to see exactly what information is out there about, let's say, one of your prospective customers or your organization, if you're an end user itself, feel free to scan the link, fill it in. We'll make sure that we get a demo, a tailored demo for your organization. We'll add the identifiers. We'll make sure that everything is there. And then we'll take you through the platform and make sure that we have some benefits out of that, right? This is also the point where we'd like to take some questions. So we do have a couple of questions that have come through. But if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box and into the Q&A, right? One of the first ones that we have is, how can we confirm if our organization or an employee's credentials are part of those leaks that were mentioned, right? So that 16 billion credential leak. Just as a note, it's an interesting thing about Flare is their credential database for all of those leaks is actually over 30 billion, right? So that 16 billion of leaks is only a small part of the amount of information that is out there about organizations. So it's incredibly important to be able to reference it, which is why we are offering this tailored demo, right? Do you know how we can partner with you? We'll definitely also showcase if you want to partner with us. I'll also include a link into the chat box, which is the CRS partner registration link, right? The sign up link. So you'll definitely be able to sign up with us as a CRS partner for Flare. Okay. So just give me 1 second, and that link will be shared into the chat box very shortly. Okay, there we go. Then we got another one. How does Flare integrate with SIM platforms? There is the open API that you would be able to use, or the API usage from Flare. However, there is an integration with Azure Sentinel. So there is those alerts that Stuart was able to showcase. Stuart, do you want to elaborate on that one at all? Integration with SIM platform, do you want to give a possible use case there?
Yeah, I mean, everything that I showed in the UI, so all of the event details, so everything, if we use a Stealer log as an example, all the content of that Stealer log can be called via API. We do have an integrations team. The online documentation is really, really good as well. I mean, obviously I'm going to say that, but I've worked, like I said, with loads of vendors, and the online documentation is great. It goes into a lot of detail about the API. There's example SDKs. And like I said, we've got an integrations team if you need assistance with anything. But I would say most SIEM or SOAR platforms out there, we will have integrated with. And like I said, there isn't anything that you can't query. That's the great thing about it. It's very flexible API. And just going back to the question about the, this 16 billion breach, exactly like Tristan said, we have all that data already. I mean, that's the thing. That big breach was a lot of regurgitated old breaches from several years ago. So I have a lot of partners saying, oh, we've got customers who want to know if they were part of it. And my response is, well, if I was a customer, I just want to know what recent breaches I've been part of. I don't really care about breaches from 3 or 4 years ago. I want to know breaches yesterday, 2 weeks ago, because breaches from 3 or 4 years ago, the passwords are probably going to be out of date. So that's, we've already got that all data if you want to look at it. But I would be far more interested and focused on, are my employees' credentials in the breach from yesterday or last week or the week before? We could filter it down to Adobe, to Klarna, to Apple, to whatever, if you wanted to, but the platform is presented in such a way, it's just easier to say, here's all of your leak credentials.
Most definitely. Thanks for that, Stuart. That's brilliant. And most definitely. So we got another question here from Liam. What type of industries does Flare have successful case studies in? Within the South African context, we've got insurance, we've got government. There is across board, there are use cases for MSSP partners who have taken the solution on board, who are able to cater to smaller businesses as well. However, the larger use cases is going to be government and insurance at the moment within the South African context. However, in the larger context, I'm sure that there's banking, financial industry, healthcare, as well as other industries that handle critical data as well. However, noting that, like we said, a lot of the information about organization handles information about credential leaks specific to organizations, right? So it's going to be cross-industry. It's going to be organizations who need to be able to cater for breaches before they even happen, right? So it's kind of every industry, but from a South African and African context, insurance and government industries are the largest at the moment that have taken it on board. Okay. Another question here is, how does Flare ensure that it limits the false positives on data uncovered?
So
Stuart,
yeah,
do you want to take that?
I'll take that one, because the key thing here is when you add your identifier. So if you added an identifier which is a top level domain, so bbc.co.uk, for example, that is essentially a search criteria to look for any reference to that within the Flare database. And then the platform is clever enough to say, right, I have discovered it in stealer logs, credential leaks, all that type of information, and automatically categorize it. So if it sees a corporate email address in a stealer log, that will be classed as high or critical, as opposed to just saying I found stealer logs with references to bbc.co.uk. They're all going to be, incredibly important. Not all of them will be, but the platform is clever enough to say this is a corporate email address that I have discovered in a stealer log, so therefore this is more important than stuart.smith@gmail.com, who happens to have logged into the BBC website. So the platform is clever enough to take all those considerations in place.
100%. Thanks for that, Stuart. Okay, cool. We got another question here from Neil Jackson. So generally, we don't mention our competitors on these calls. However, I have a very high level of confidence in Flare. So it's organizations like Zero Fox, Recorded Future, and in every instance that we have come across, we have won just on the basis of those demos. So Flare is incredibly intuitive. It's easy to use, and it's one of the highly regarded solutions in the industry. So just watch the space for Flare as well. Okay. Got another one here. What features does Flare have that assist analysts with alert fatigue? So there's definitely ways to handle those alerts, right? There's ways to remediate those alerts and to be able to focus on what you're able to exclude from your view, right? For example, if you're getting those amounts of false positives, there's exclusion policies that you would be able to put around identifiers. You can really tailor down the platform to exactly what you want to see, right? And you can handle those alerts in ways that are very process building, right? So you can build an entire process for the platform that is incredibly intuitive and extremely easy to use. Okay. How does Flare handle credential exposures across third-party breaches? So I believe that's something that Stuart showcased in his demo as well. There is the supply chain attack component of Flare that you would be able to put in a keyword and then be able to monitor for third-party breaches for the organization. There are organizations who also make use of their identifiers, and this is the flexibility and the power in the identifier usage. They create a bucket of identifiers just monitoring based on third-party organizations. Okay, and that allows them to specifically focus on third-party breaches that occur with their suppliers and etc. that inherently secures them. Okay, fantastic. Is there any other questions? Okay. I think the other one is, how frequently is the monitor data refreshed? Stuart, do you want to take that on?
So, I mean, because we are monitoring Telegram and Signal, those platforms are pretty much instantaneous. So as soon as a stealer log, for example, is shared on one of the Telegram channels that we are gathering information from, we will alert on it. So there isn't a delay of 24 or 48 hours or something like that. Dark web forums, obviously, you know, those aren't updated as frequently as Telegram. So we will alert as soon as we gather that information. Telegram, like I said, is pretty much instant because Telegram is still very much the sharing platform for threat actors. There was concern within the market that when the guy from Telegram got arrested, that threat actors would move over to a different platform. That hasn't been the case at all. You know, we're monitoring 25,000 Telegram channels, and we're just constantly adding to it. So as soon as something is posted on a Telegram channel and your identifier is looking for it, we will alert on it.
Most definitely. Thanks for that, Stuart. That's brilliant. And then another one that we have is, does Flare integrate with IAM tools that can monitor for normal usage activities stemming from compromised accounts? No, so the integration that you would have for Flare is actually one that is recent, which is going to be the Azure AD integration, which you can then confirm whether or not a user exists, whether the credential pair exists, and you can validate those results, and you would be able to showcase whether or not it is an inherent risk to the organization, and then change passwords and credential pairs based on that. So that is how you would integrate with essentially your Azure AD as one of those IAM tools.